welcome to another week of shows. I've already blown it. What can you do if you're an idiot like me? Right. So I'm going to start with Nine Souls, which is a film by Toshika Toyoda. Now, I did Blue Spring, I did Porno Star from the other film. I still got to do this documentary made. It's also in the Third Window box set. I haven't done that yet, but I'll get to that. But I've been doing this fiction film, so if you've seen the other videos, you know I was a big fan of Porno Star and Blue Spring. And I'm planning to buy the new box set. I've pre-ordered it for the Toyota box set Volume 2, or whatever it's called, from Third Windows. So I'm well into the Toyota train now. It was heavily advertised by Hoos from Touch of Film, how great this guy was, and I hate to admit it, but he was right. No, he was very right. This guy is amazing. And Nine Souls is his best film I've seen. But I've got to say, Blue Spring and Porno Star also both excellent movies. It's just that this is like a step up. And it's just in confidence and storytelling. This one just seems more relaxed. Like it's more... It doesn't have those early film feeling of maybe try harder once in a while. Like the first two films were really good. But the first one, Porno Star, did have this feeling of he's trying to show what he can do. And sometimes it's a bit forced, some of the gangster stuff. And the second one, the narrative kind of didn't flow great in the middle. There was elements that were really interesting, other elements that just seemed to kind of be a bit clunky. But it didn't matter though, because the acting and the style and everything else was so good. And just the atmosphere was great. So it wasn't like it was... These were the minor flaws and very accomplished works. Like, when I say it was a bit clunky, it's just like a couple of scenes. It's not like anything major. And it actually becomes more obvious when you've seen Nine Souls. Like when you're watching it in isolation, it doesn't feel that obvious. But just when you see compared to how well this one does, a lot of similar things to Blue Spring in the sense of it's a bunch of characters and you're going from character to character. Even though there's a main character, there's always other characters who are important. This one is just a lot smooth about how we go about their dealing with them and talking about them and looking at how they react. So basically, Nine Souls is like the mature version of what had come before. It was like when the director kind of has had his early films and has found his voice and is a lot more comfortable and he knows what he's about and he's ready to go, basically. Nine Souls is about escaped criminals. It starts off with a great shot that floats over Tokyo and you see little bits disappear, buildings disappearing, and then the city starts to disappear all around the Tokyo Eiffel Tower looking... I think it's Tokyo Tower, but it looks like the Eiffel Tower. It's a small version of it. It's been used a lot in different films in the past. It gets trashed a lot in movies. And everything, the whole city disappears apart from this Tokyo Tower, which he can see, one of the characters can see from outside his window. It turns out this character's a shut-in, and you can hear his father and his brother yelling at each other from another room. And this shut-in's got a knife and he leaves the room and you hear, and suddenly he's in a prison after killing his father. And this character played by the same actor who played the lead in Blue Spring. He's a very good actor. He's had a good career. He seems to always been good stuff. And he's just he's now this young man who's sort of traumatized by his upbringing. He has a problem with life and how to live life. He just doesn't seem to know how to fit in, really, is the thing. He doesn't know how to communicate with people. But he's one of 9 people. So he goes into this prison and he's into a room with these other 9 men who all have to have their mattress in this one area, eat in this area, do other business in this area, and basically live in it, live with each other and deal with each other as long as the sentence allows for, because basically they're in prison and they have to deal with these other criminals, and no one cares. But that's the first 10 minutes. You see one of the characters go mad, one of the prisoners go mad, so he's taken, dragged from the cell. And then basically you now have 9. And during a scuffle, they see the scuffle that takes a guy out, they see a rat floating around. Why is there a rat in here? This is disgusting. And then they find a hole where the rat came from. It turns out there's a hole out of the prison just because the prison's decrepit. And a hole's been formed by the rat. So they escape through this hole, and all 9 of them escape the prison, which is in the middle of nowhere. And you see a great sequence of them all running, escaping, all really happy to finally escape from this place. And as they do the running and jumping stuff, and very Richard Lester-ish things, you get these freeze frames of what their crimes were. Like, imagine when it was ripped off quite a few times. It's been something that's been done already in other films. This one's done really well. I mean, to see it back to done, look at Suicide Squad, the original one, where it was so fast you could barely read anything. This one, you get the basic of who each character is. But more importantly, as you go through the story, you get more of the character anyway. It's just a kind of a quick thing to tell you what, because there's 9 characters, and they've all had their head shaved and things, so it's like so you know who each one is and what they're about before going into the story. And the story is basically of them. They managed to get a hold of a van because they robbed a van from this weird pervert guy, and throw him out. And the van's not in the greatest condition, and only 1 or 2 of them can drive. And so they get a van because they've heard of this. They know the guy who went a bit mad. He was a forger, and so they said he had money hidden somewhere, and they know where it should be. So they're going there. That's where they're going to get the money so they can disappear. And nothing goes to plan. It's really the first half of the movie is a series of adventures with them all together. At one point, to hide from people, they go into a restaurant and drag someone and get something to eat, which is a hilarious thing because some of them look totally like men in drag, and the other ones look feminine enough to get away with it. So it depends on the actor. And basically it's with them trying to survive in the back years of Japan, just trying to survive with very little resources, but they don't want to go back to prison. Now, I don't want to go into tons of detail about the film, like the plot, because even though it's made in 2003, it's not a well-seen film. So I'm trying to encourage people to go watch it by describing a little bit about it and then saying why it's so good. Because I'm not going to go into something where it's been a film has been out for a long time, but it's been available for anyone to see. This one hasn't. This one is available. If you look for it, you can find it, but it's not generally available. So you have to really put effort into finding it, and you really should, because it's really good. Because as the film goes on, it's about how these characters start to split apart, and you start to see more of their criminal life, and because you get to know them as criminals, then you get to know them as people interacting with each other and their good points and their bad points in the first half of the movie. So you get to see what brings them together, but you also see what breaks them apart as the second half of the movie goes on, and you start to see what they're about, what the situation is for them, and what drives them, what drove them to become criminals, whether it was passion or just money or dysfunction or just being poor. There's a whole variety of things that drive them. Everyone's got something that's driving them, and some of the stories are quite tragic, and some of them are sad, and some of them are just like, well, what did you expect? Because some of them are naive and don't think things through, and some of them want to move on, but they don't know how to. Some of them do not want to be criminals anymore, but they don't know how to move on, and they don't want to spend all their time in jail again, because they want to be like, I want to get out of here and actually do something. So it becomes a story of a variety of crime, and how crime affects the criminals, not the citizens, really. So what happens after, you've been a criminal? It's something you get a lot in Edward Bunker novels, where he covers that a lot, with criminals who are out on parole or criminals who escape, and it's like, how does it affect them? What's the psychology of being a criminal or being a prisoner do to you? And this one is like, what does it do to them as they try and get back into life, even though they've still got a price in their heads, and it's like they have to try and find a way. Like, the cops are after them, anyone can inform on them. So going back to your old life is not a good idea. And you get a lot of tragedy of people who just don't know how to deal with things. You've got the guy who I talked about in the beginning, who was a shut-in. There's other ones who... There's another guy who had a girlfriend who found cheating on him, and that's what drives him. There's another one... Another one's got a girlfriend who also caused him trouble. And all those stories are about how they deal with each other. There's another guy who had difficulties with his son, and it gets darker and darker the more you find out. There's a small man who's a dwarf basically, who's a doctor, and he assisted someone in suicide, and that's why he's in prison. And you've got all these different stories, but these are all stories you find out as you go. So you know about halfway through all these stories, and then it's like, how does that affect them as they go on with their story? And that's what the crux of the film is like, how does it affect people? How does crime affect people who were the criminals? And it's a moving thing because it's an odyssey through Japan, these men trying to find a way to some sort of home, and how so many of them are already damaged so much that that's kind of impossible. So it's a look at how crime affects people, and how violence affects you, and how... But it's not done in a way that's preachy. It's like, it's done in a very whimsical way. It's like, it's a weird... It feels bizarrely influenced by Bill Forsyth, the Scottish director, who has also had this kind of amused, darkly humorous sense of humanity towards people, even though they've done bad things. He never looked down on them. This film's the same feeling to it. It's like these are all flawed characters, and you get into fantasy land with some of them, and it is dark, but they still respect the humanity of the characters. Like Blue Spring, it's almost a metaphor for society. Really, is like Blue Spring, it was like a delinquent school, a metaphor for working class people in a society. And this one is a working class. It's almost a metaphor for how does society deal with criminals. It's also it's also a metaphor of how does society deal with their own flaws, their own sins. I mean, this one, it locks them up and then they come back to haunt them. But it's also, these prisoners can be a metaphor for society, as like the various people who have made mistakes and can't quite move on for various reasons. A few of them can, or try to, but the past always comes back to haunt you in some way. Like your earlier self, the stupider self, can always mess you up. So it becomes a thing of how do people deal with the past? It's like, how do people survive with the flaws in their character? That's what the film seems to be about, more than criminals escaping. It's about how do you deal with the things that are wrong with you. And it can be a variety of things that are wrong with you, from social reasons to your own like immaturity and mental instability. And it's like, it's kind of like just a cross section of males in society and the things that affect them and what drives them to bad behaviour. That's what the theme of the film seems to be, rather than escape criminals. The escape criminal thing is just the genre that they use as the kind of the motor for it. But what's really good is it spreads out, and you see as they become less uniform and start to show everyone shows their own character in the second half of the movie, it becomes a distinct way of the different ways people can react to a situation, and to institutionalised situation, how they break out of that. And institutions pretty much the society, and how do people break out of that to try and define themselves, and how that can be tragic. So it's a very complicated film, despite the fact that it takes a kind of comic, humorous situation, really, like 9 guys escaping from prison and then trying to find a way to avoid getting caught. That's just the genre kind of conceit, that the film has a lot more to say below the surface. And it's worth seeing also because there's lots of beautiful scenes that I have not talked about, like nuanced scenes that are pretty heartbreaking. I mean, the second half of the movie is very emotional, and it's very emotional with people who you would normally in real life not feel much emotion for. And, you know, and it's not cheap emotion. Like, a lot of Hollywood movies, they try and do cheap emotion for... You may sympathise with someone who you really never would. And this one, you sympathise with people because they're human. It's not because they're innocent of anything, but it's because you can see the humanity of them. And that's what's great about the film. It's a very humane film. So this is a wonderful film. I'd highly recommend you watch it. It's just a must-see. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this inspires you to go and see the film. I'll be back with another video soon. Right, bye for now.